This is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac. Welcome back. This week we got to speak to Director of Care, Learning and Development, Christie Journey. We got into talking about failing fast, agility in learning, Gen Z, so much more. Listen. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac. And I told you so. I told you we'd get some terrific guests back on, and I have got a phenomenal guest with us today. Prepare to be inspired and really prepare to learn. So hopefully you're going to be walking away, taking some notes, grab a pen and pencil, but you can watch this anytime. I said pen and pencil, pen and paper. You can watch this at any time. Leaders, this is the place to come to. One of the places to come to. The Learning Podcast, we've got a few great things when it comes to leadership, but we want to here just encourage and inspire you to become fantastic influencers like my guest is. So without further ado, I'm going to get right to my guest. I got to know her a little bit about a month or two ago when she came on our team call and she graciously accepted to come on this podcast. And what a phenomenal conversation I had with her last week that inspired me. So I know it's going to inspire everyone out there. So I want to introduce the Director of Care, Learning and Development, Christie Journey. Christie, welcome to the podcast.
Max,
It's so great to have you on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in because there's several topics I really want to get to with you this morning. But it's so important that the audience get to know you and hear about your career journey. So walk us a little bit through your career journey. It doesn't have to be a little bit. You can walk us as far back as you like. So let's hear a little bit about your career journey and what got you to this point.
Sure. About 20 years ago, I walked into a call center while I was in college studying education and had never worked in that field before. It was actually telemarketing. I worked for MCI about 20 years ago and really thought it was better than waitressing. So I thought I would check it out and change it up and do something different. And from there, really fell into learning and development. And so I had been an education major. And as I got into the role and I was making great money, great benefits, paying my way through school, and figured out they had a department that did training and worked with new hires and all of these things, and thought I might like to do that. And so got a stretch assignment, and it led to an internship, which led to a role as an assistant trainer. And then my career grew from there for a couple of years. I went from sales to customer service as a trainer, traveled around with that company and opened call centers with what they called vendor operations, what we would call Global Care today. Helped open a couple call centers in different locations in the U.S. and overseas. And then when I took some time away from my career to get married, have kids, start that part of my life. And then when I came back to it, I worked for JP Chase as a trainer in their call center and learned a lot about the financial industry and also learned a lot about how different organizations approach learning and development. And then one day, T-Mobile came to my town and was opening a brand new call center and was hiring trainers. And I applied and helped open this call center in Springfield, Missouri. And I, from there, went from trainer to coach, then back to senior training. L&D is my heart, so I never get very far away. And at that time, they had a senior trainer role, which really prepared me to take on L&D manager. And then I was the learning and development manager in that site for about 8 years. And then within the care organization, they opened a great role called FLDC, Frontline Leadership Development Consultant, which was my dream gig. And I took that role and I supported 2 sites, Salem, Oregon and Springfield, Missouri, and would fly back and forth every other week. And that role taught me so much. It really taught me how to lead others through influence instead of maybe direct oversight as their manager. You're influencing the change you're trying to see in the business, which is such a valuable lesson to learn on your leadership journey. And so from there, that really helped me learn about how different sites operate, how we're looking at it from an overall care strategy. And I transitioned from that role into a senior manager with learning and development. First, focused on the frontline learning and development, and then went back to leadership development and stayed in that role, gosh, I think another 7 years. And within that role, I not only led a team of FLDCs that supported like the East region or the Central region or the West region in care, but then also took a lateral move within that team and focused on the strategy and curriculum design and everything we were doing for leaders in the care organization. And then recently, and through those roles, I've been able to participate in really great developmental programs like leadership development program for for manager to senior manager. And then most recently, Magenta 9, which prepared me to step into this director role. So late last year, about December, the director posting came available for frontline L&D, so making all the training for our frontline experts in care. I posted for the position and went through a really rigorous interview process. And in January, I stepped into this role. So now I'm back focused on frontline L&D, and I've been very, very fortunate that I've been able to stay in something that is not only my career and where my expertise lies, but also my passion. And so I love to learn about how people learn. I love to bring that to life. And I have a really phenomenal team that I get to work with every day that creates learning solutions for all of Care, Legacy, Sprint, and Metro in our front line.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing, amazing journey. Just what a testament to just hard work and just, being able to really show your passion, the passion that you have for learning and development, and being able to stay within that is just phenomenal. You mentioned some lessons along the way, so I'm not going to ask that specific question, but I do want you to maybe expand a little bit on influencing, because that's something I talk about a lot. And you said that was a big lesson for you that I'm sure you're probably using a lot today. Talk a little bit more about how influencing has helped you become a great leader.
Yeah, I would say before I took that role, I had learned as an L&D manager or support manager in the sites, you learn a lot about influencing your peers or collaborating with your peers to bring about common outcomes and meet common goals. But as an FLDC, you were really influencing others to change their own behavior to get to their goals that they want, right? And believe it or not, oftentimes, even though that's a goal folks have for themselves and want to meet, the actual behavioral change, we've all been there, right? Tried to eat better, tried to stop smoking, try to exercise more. It's not as easy as just putting the goal down, right? So how do you influence that behavioral change? And that has served me so well in so many other capacities and so many other roles that I'm in now, because I'm not only influencing others for their own personal career goals, but how do I influence the organization to let's approach L&D differently? How do you influence your stakeholders in the business to come to a common ground of what they want to do and what you see, and we're all trying to meet the same goal, but how do we might have different approaches on how to get there. And so how do you lead through that negotiation and influence? And so it's a valuable skill, and I have found that the more scope of responsibility you have and the more people you're working with, it's a skill that you're going to lean into a lot more than some others.
Christie, no shade to anybody that I've ever talked to, and I sincerely mean this. That is the best definition of influencing that I've ever heard. and I got to tell you, I got goosebumps when you said that it's a skill. I think a lot of folks think that, I could just influence people because I have a great personality, and maybe, right? But you said it's a skill that you can continue to work on, and that's such a distinction that you made between, we sometimes, again, want to do some things for ourselves, right? Get more healthy or things like that. But when you're able to impact someone else, that's quite a skill, especially in your case, influencing a whole organization like that to go in one direction. That is just absolutely awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. Um,
Sure.
I want to jump into some things that you've seen out there that you feel leaders can get better at. What are a couple of opportunities that you're seeing these days that you'd love to see leaders just get a little bit better at?
I think in general, it's really difficult, but I've also seen that the more open and honest and a little bit vulnerable you're willing to be as a leader, it's easy, especially for new leaders, to step into a role and think you have to have all the answers and you have to give all the direction and make all the decisions. But what I've found is that I don't have all the answers, and even if I did, there's going to be a bias there, because there's only one perspective, mine, right? And so being vulnerable with the teams that you lead and say, hey, I'm not sure what's the right direction to go here, and I want your thoughts, opens the door for them to truly share their point of view. I think, it's important that they understand I might have the ultimate decision, but your point of view is valued, it matters, and I really want to hear it, and I want to talk through it. And when you're open and a little bit vulnerable to that and say, hey, I'm learning here too, or admitting when you've made a mistake, it should show them that this is a safe place for them to also do that, right? And you get better collaboration. That collaboration and that brainstorming, the open and honest brainstorming, leads to better innovation and better results. And if they don't feel like their point of view matters, or they have a safe place to share it, or you're open to other ideas than just your own, you're not going to get that collaboration and creativity. So I think being vulnerable is an important skill in the right way, right? And there's a fine balance there between being willing to step up and say, especially in a crisis, okay, here's what we're going to do, because they're also looking to you for leadership and direction, of course. But most of the time, it can be a collaborative decision. And so creating that safe space for that.
I think that's so awesome. And so let me ask a follow-up question to that, because there was some other things that you said behind this last week, and you're dead on there. Why do leaders struggle with being vulnerable? Is that a pride thing? Why do leaders struggle with that?
Well, I know I'll speak for me. I think there was many years in my career I was afraid to fail or afraid to show that I didn't know the answer, right? And so being vulnerable and admitting when you've made a mistake as a leader, admitting as, oh, I learned from this, sets the tone for your entire organization to feel free to do so as well. And we learn a lot more from our failures than we often do from our successes, right? And so it's important. Now, it's important to fail fast and recover and learn your lesson and get on with what you're doing. But as a leader, I think you have to, again, make that safe space for them to be able to fail and learn from it and coach them through it and help them get back on track. But if we're afraid to fail, we're never going to take the risk that makes us bold and makes us the uncarrier, right? I also think that vulnerability creates a more inclusive space, right, where people feel like their voice is valued and heard, and that's important. It's important to take deliberate action to be inclusive and be open to other people's ideas. And I've just found that the best way that I've gotten those results is to lower the waterline a little bit, be a little bit vulnerable myself, admit when I've made mistakes and failed and learned, and just say, we're all in this together.
Yeah, the deliberately inclusive, that really resonates with me now, and resonated when you said that last week. And I also love how you said failing fast, because I've done that several times. And I love the way you explained it, because then you can bounce back faster as well. And I think a lot of leaders might struggle sometimes to really admit, man, I really blew that. That was an awful decision. And you have talked about just being open, with that. I think that's awesome. What would be a second opportunity that you see that leaders can really get better at these days?
I, especially in the climate that we're in today, that where we're all learning probably some things that we weren't aware of before, after COVID and after having this time at home and watching the news and becoming more aware. I would say taking steps to be deliberately inclusive of folks that don't have the perspective that you have because they haven't had the same life experiences is crucial, right? And making that space for them to have a voice. So our DE&I networks do a great job of giving us information that helps us see perspectives different than our own, and I encourage everybody to get involved. There's not one DE&I group that doesn't resonate with me personally, but also not only seeking those points of view out, right? Making sure you're not going to the same people that you typically go to bounce ideas off. Pick somebody different. Pick somebody that has a perspective completely different than your own. You're going to see things through a different light. You're also going to avoid that confirmation bias that you might have, where you think this idea is great because it would really resonate with me, but you're losing the perspectives of all your other customers that you're trying to influence and trying to hit. So I think that's the second skill we've all can do a little bit better at.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Nothing for me to add there. That just it hits right to the heart of leadership 101 today, because it's definitely different right here in 2021 going into 22. Well, let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about some strengths that you see out there, and what are some things that you're seeing leaders do extremely well out there today and to continue to get better at?
Well, being in L&D, as I mentioned, I'm always curious and passionate about how people learn. And I've really started to notice, with COVID and having more time at home with my kids and seeing them do remote learning and how they learn, I think a strength that we're not leveraging enough is our learning agility that I see in this organization, especially as we look at the newer generations coming into the workforce. The way they learn is so vastly different than how we learned as we were going through school and in the classroom setting, right? I look at my kids, and when they need to learn something, they go to YouTube or Google or even TikTok to learn what they need in that moment, right? No longer do we typically pull folks into a classroom for weeks on end or hours on end to learn something they might use a month from now. We need to look at how do we get them the information they need in the moment they need it? How can they learn just that portion of it, apply it, really let it stick and resonate, and then move on to learning the next thing. And so I'm starting to see that shift, especially in our front line as the newer generations come into the workforce. And I also think with COVID, prior to that, there wasn't a ton of appetite for remote virtual learning classrooms, right, for training. Yeah. And now yeah. After we've gone through COVID, I think a lot of our leaders see that, wow, this is a viable way to learn, and there's some things that you can get from virtual learning that you can't get in the classroom, right? Like I can get a cohort of learners that span all of customer care and maybe have representation from all of our sites, right, including global care, which is going to lend to a lot more diverse discussions, and you're going to expand your network, and you're going to meet new people and see that they're attacking a problem a different way, and maybe that will work for me, right? It just opens up those silos. And so I'm hopeful for, first of all, we learn very quickly here at T-Mobile, but I'm also hopeful that we'll adopt some of those new ways of learning, and I think that's a strength that we should continue to leverage.
Yeah, I love that, having that agility in learning and being agile today. I think a lot of leaders can get left behind if we aren't, agile today.
Yeah.
One of the great things that you mentioned to me last week that I'd love for you to expand on a little bit, that I've walked away with, when I'm back with my team, I want to be a lot more intentional on this, is that you're very intentional on how you interact with Generation Z and how you use all of the great skills that Generation Z brings to the table. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
I think we have a lot to learn from them. I know I have certainly learned a lot more from my kids and those that I've coached and developed than they've probably learned from me. But I think learning to observing them, observing how they learn, meeting them where they are in the way we communicate, and that means leveraging a lot of social media. They don't want to be chained to their desk reading email all day, right? So how can we change it up in the way we push learning to them, in the way we push communication to them, and how can that be a little bit self-led? So those are all things that we're exploring in Care L&D of how we bring that to life for the future, how they can build their skill set from the very moment they graduate new hire training until they become a director. And how do they take charge of that and decide what they need to learn? Maybe I'm an expert in network and I get that, and so I don't need to go to an instructor-led training about network, but I really need some help in my sales skills, right? And showing the value to my customers of our products and services. And so how can they select in or select out based on where they are? Also, and how can we get in those short snippets that are really going to resonate, that they can apply right away? We've put some things in place where while they're on the phone call with the customer, they can pull up a step-by-step guide on their second screen that walks them how to do a process change in the system, rather than pull them in training and maybe you'll use this 6 weeks later and hopefully you remember it. We're creating a lot more of that on demand in the moment of need learning. And I think that's something we absolutely picked up from that generation.
Oh, that is awesome. I think just your overall demeanor about Generation Z, the excitement that you've had in your voice, and about embracing and how you and your team are such up to the challenge of not only embracing some of the new skills that they can bring, but really embracing the challenge of showing them new skills as well. I think that is awesome, and I think that's such a lesson for all leaders out there these days. All right, just a couple more questions for you. This has been awesome. And let's focus back on Christie for a few seconds. And so people have heard your career journey, and it's one that is so inspiring. So now that Christie is a director, what are some things that you continue to do to develop yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's more challenging to develop yourself. I think that's a challenge for all of us, right? But just like every time I get paid, I put money in my 401k and pay myself first. I try to take that same philosophy with development and pay myself first in my education and keeping it going, right? So even if it's 15 minutes a day, one of the best things I love to do is listen to some leadership podcasts in the morning. It gets my head in the right space. It gives me different ideas. It gives me different perspectives. I have a few that I love. And so even if it's just that, that's enough, right? Break it into more manageable tasks. But I think it's important to do that every day to remotivate yourself so you're bringing your best to those that you lead. T-Mobile has a ton of offerings. Take advantage of them. Take advantage of the tuition reimbursement. I finished my degree through T-Mobile. I'm starting to work on my master's at Purdue next spring. So take advantage of all of those things. But I think the biggest opportunity we have is to just carve out that time, just like exercising, just like eating well. How do you make that a priority in your life? Because it will make all the difference in your career journey.
Wow. Oh man, the only thing I'll add to that is I will highlight this when I send out the notes. I loved when you said it last week. I love it even more now. Pay yourself first. Pay yourself first. It comes down to it could be that simple, and we're all busy. But if we have a director here who can find that time to do for herself and go back to school as well, listen, do we have to say anything more? It's in this day and time, that's the only way that I keep up, is every day I'm doing something. And I love what you said. Pay yourself first. Christie, this has been just unbelievably awesome. I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I'm hoping that this can be an open invitation to get you back on maybe sometime later in the year.
Anytime. Yeah, absolutely.
We could dig into a few more of these topics that we kind of just scratched the surface on. So we're going to wrap up. Folks, make sure that not only you watch this, any new leaders that you have out there, send this to them. And you just heard from a great leader in the company, just some really practical things that you could do to continue to develop your skills, some opportunities, some strengths that we see in general. And Christie really gave just some practical things that you could do to get past that and just get better every day. So Christie, thank you so much again. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I appreciate the questions and the time. So thanks.
Absolutely. Well, folks, this has been Kenny and Christie with the Yak with Mac. We will talk to you next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.